Let me start over. Welcome, everyone. The topic of today's webinar is the impact of individual purpose in managing post-pandemic uncertainties. And we're actually going to look at individual purpose and organizational purpose in a little bit broader context than just during times of uncertainty, but we will connect that together. As I started to say, this topic is one that I hadn't really considered. It was obviously purpose in life has been an underlying piece of how we all live, but understanding how that relates to organizational purpose and the broader context is something that I feel is an area that not all of us have maybe explored in the way that we should, but we may be aware of it in different ways. So I'm Linda Nelson. Um, as you know, I do a lot of the webinars for ICOR, and part of the drivers for the topics that we see in our webinars this year has been around the topic of organizational resilience, in specifically looking at it from the pandemic viewpoint, and for hoping someday to move out into that post-pandemic era. We really thought when we put together our schedule for this year that we would see by April or May that we would be in a post-pandemic area, and it's a bit discouraging to understand that this era is going to go on for a little bit longer. I think we're all feeling some of that fatigue, but really, really tying to the work that ICOR has done in our international work on organizational resilience, and as far as standards go, as well as our individual work as an organization to try to lead with that area. So this is one area that I think really needs further exploration. So we will be looking at our goal itself, or objective for this webinar, is to understand how the intersection of organizational and individual purpose interact and fuel each other by increasing the resilience of the organization itself. And that really is the purpose of everything that we do, is how can we increase the resilience of our organization. The recording of the webinar, like always, will be available on the ICOR webinar page in a day or two. We will also just remember, if you have questions, I will try to answer your questions today. I don't think I tend to make my webinars take the entire time, so I am focusing on getting done a little bit ahead of time. So if you have questions, there should be time to answer them, so feel free to post them anytime that you'd like. And just as a reminder, you will receive a certificate of attendance if you attend a minimum of 35 minutes. So I wanted to start off with really the big picture. So as many of you may be aware, ICOR has an organizational resilience capability assessment where we measure and we help you do a self-assessment of the capabilities that need to be in place to make organizations more resilient. And we've defined those around our 5 dimensions. And what I'm showing here are all the different strategies that support those dimensions and the capabilities that support the strategies we'll talk about a little bit later. But under leadership and strategy, what we're going to be focusing on today is having that strategy of a shared vision and unity of purpose, and specifically looking at what does it mean to have a unity of purpose. So in our dimension 1 under leadership and strategy, we state that organizational resilience is enhanced when the organization intentionally implements strategies to increase its resilience. That makes sense. And we're understanding that the behavior of its leadership is a key contributor to how an organization implements its organizational resilience strategies. And all of that is rooted in its understanding of itself and its relationship with others. So today we're going to be talking about its actual understanding of itself. So we're really drilling down in here to get to the nitty-gritty of, yeah, this sounds great in theory, but what does it mean? How do we actually do this work? And as much as I don't really appreciate bugs or insects of any kind, I know they have a very important role in the world and to our environment. And the pictures that you see of bugs or insects always show really how they work together for a common goal. And so this picture, in my mind, showed a shared vision and unity of purpose. And so our outcome for strategy 1 is that there's a clearly articulated and understood purpose, vision, and values that provide clarity to decision making at all levels of the organization. And then looking at what capabilities do you need to have in place to fulfill that strategy? Well, you need to have your behavior aligned to a shared vision and purpose. The personnel of the organization need to clearly understand its vision, purpose, and core values and their contribution to that. And then the organization's vision, purpose, and core values need to provide strategic direction, coherence, and clarity in all decision making. The organization's strategic and operational goals and objectives need to be supported by individual goals and objectives that are aligned to the organization's, again, purpose, vision, and values. And finally, the organization recognizes the need to reflect on and, if necessary, revise the organization's purpose, vision, and core values in response to external and internal changes. So in this year's webinars, we haven't done a lot of polls, but in this case, what I would like you to do is look at these questions to see to what extent do you agree with each of these statements. And so what you'll have is the opportunity to just click the box for the ones that you agree with. The other thing about GoToWebinar is you don't have a lot of choices in how you set up your polls. And secondly, they have a word limit. And so the actual, let me show what they are here is, these are the 5 things. I clearly understand the organization's mission, purpose, and values. The organization's mission, vision, purpose, and core values inspire me to contribute my best work. I believe in the approach taken by leaders to reach the organizations again. I see a clear tie between that and my individual role, and I feel personally aligned with the organization's values and my values. So those are the total questions. The polls will have them a little bit smaller. So I'm only going to give you about 20 seconds to answer this, but I'd like to just get an idea for you to see um, if you guys could vote. Yep, thank you. To see which one is how many of these do you feel aligned to? And really the purpose for this is for you to get an idea of how aligned you think you are with the work of your organization or the purpose of the organization. So we'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to close it and share the results. So for most of you, 76%, you understand why your organization exists and you feel that you're contributing to it. And from then we kind of drop off. And I know it's not a huge drop off, but I feel that any percentage points that aren't where you don't feel that you're clearly in tune with what your organization does is something that you need to think about. And ironically, not ironically, but actually, um, interestingly enough, the 76% of you clearly understand your organization's purpose. That's 24% of you that say you don't really know what your organization's purpose is. And so that is also something that pretty much is in alignment with a lot of the research today. So just that kind of gives you a baseline to think about your own perspective as what we talk about today. So let's get into the webinar itself. This is what I really wanted to just start with was a platform and look at what are we talking about. So it starts with the why of the organization or your tree. Why does the organization exist? What's its purpose? And then you're divided up into different groups within your organization, whether it's by divisions or teams or whatever it is. That becomes kind of the nest why. How does that part of what you're doing contribute to the organization? And then you have the bird itself, the individual. How does the individual contribute to the purpose of the organization? And so we're going to talk next about individual purpose itself. And I always like to start with definitions so that we have a very clear idea of what it is that we're talking about. Because like we all speak different languages, we come from different countries, we come from different backgrounds, and sometimes the terms themselves aren't in alignment. So when we're talking about individual purpose, we're really talking about your overarching sense of what matters in your life, what you experience, and you experience purposefulness when you strive to work towards something personally and you find something personally meaningful or valued. And that's the McKinsey definition. I actually like the Mark Twain quote, which says the 2 most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Why are you here? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And so, although you may express your purpose in different ways in different contexts, um, it's really what everyone close to you and knows you recognizes as uniquely you and would miss most if you're gone. And so, as we get into talking about this, understanding that you might have different individual purposes based on where you are and what you do and what group you're with, but you should have an overarching individual purpose that is aligned to all of those things. And thinking on this a lot, as I have done in the past couple of weeks as I've been studying this in more detail, is this might be where we start to feel uncomfortable or unhappy, is when we see that disconnect between what we really want to be and what we really want to accomplish and what it is that we're actually doing. And so again, your purpose becomes your brand. It's what you're driven to achieve. It's the magic that makes you tick. It's really not what you do. It's how you do your job and why. And we're talking about this within the context of your job, but understanding that you are who you are and you are who what you bring to your job. And so what are your strengths and passions you bring to the table no matter where you're seated at that table? So remember that purpose is not a professional title. It's not limited to your current job or organization. It is not a list of your education, experience, or skills that you've gathered in your life. What it is it's something that springs from your identity. It becomes the essence of who you are. And so, why does individual purpose matter? Well, people who can draw energy and direction from a sense of individual purpose, they have found are going to weather challenging times with more resilience. So, if you're looking at hiring people, you're going to want to look at people who have a strong individual purpose that's aligned to what you're doing. And purposeful work and a purposeful life are enduring benefits in and amongst themselves. And this is something that everyone should have the opportunity to do. And I wanted to just take a quick step back here and share with you something that made me think, this whole topic made me think in more detail. So back in the 70s, my dad worked for a company and he was like an office manager and he loved his job. He loved who he worked with. It was something that really aligned to who he was and how he felt that he contributed in the world. And in the 70s, financial crisis and economic downturn, his company had to move from the city where it was and move somewhere else. And my dad was invited to move his family with the company. And he didn't feel comfortable doing that. And so he did lose his job. And what he found was that he couldn't find another job. And so as he lost his home, and he needed to provide for his family, he looked out and he said, okay, so I can't do what it is that I've wanted to do and that I was good at, but I need to find a job where I can make sure that I can always provide for my family and I can't be let go. So he looked for a union job. And in the United States, and depending on where you live in the United States, union jobs are more or less plentiful. So in this respect, he had an opportunity to apply to be a mail carrier or a bus driver. Well, the bus driver job came through first and it was never what he wanted to do. He didn't really feel that that was part of what he needed, but as part of his individual purpose in life was to provide for his family, he felt it met that need. So then he decided, what can I do to make this job purposeful? And so he said he looked at the people that he was driving and he saw that people were, getting back and forth to work every day, that they were going back and forth to doctor appointments. And the people that he was driving really relied on him to get them where they needed to be on time. So his first part about this was, I'm going to be on time no matter what the weather, no matter what it puts, in front of me. I'm going to do my best to get my passengers to where they need to be on time. And then he said they should enjoy the ride. I want to enjoy my job as a bus driver. And being a bus driver is probably not the most enjoyable work sometimes. There's a lot of challenges with just driving a bus all day and the people that ride that bus. But he said, we're going to enjoy this ride. And so for his regular riders, he got to know them and he tried to do things that would make their ride more enjoyable and forming relationships with people that he was driving. And finally, he understood that he needed that there were a lot of people coming on his bus that, didn't really care about who he was or the bus driver. But he decided that what he could do every day was to be kind as a bus driver. And so those were really the three things that became his purpose as being the best bus driver he could be. And so as we each travel on our different roads in life, I think it makes sense to look at our purpose in life and wherever we are today to figure out how to make the best purpose for that so that we can have meaningful lives. And this is a little bit, I don't want to say mushy or whatever, but it is important today as we are all struggling in the pandemic and we are all struggling trying to manage stress and changes in our lives and changes in our work and just change everywhere on how do you look at what it is that you want from life and how do you get that as part of what the work that you need to do to have a life and to provide for yourself and your families. So an interesting study that was done, it actually came across in psychological science all the way back in 2014. They found that individual purpose and wellness were linked. So another reason for you to look at your individual purpose. And they found that people with purpose in their lives were far less prone to disease. They found that they lived longer and healthier lives. And they found that a single deviation increase in purpose decreased the risk of dying over the next decade by 15%. So in my mind, that you've already sold me on this, that making sure that what I'm doing from day to day and a lot of the hours that I'm putting in for work is aligned to my individual purpose because it will help me to live longer, which I thought that I never would have thought that. They also have a study that actually began back in 1997 that went over many years called the Rush Memory and Aging Project. And they said that when they compared patients who say they have a sense of purpose in their lives with some that they don't, they found that those that do are 2.5 times more likely to be free of dementia, were 22% less likely to exhibit risk factors of a stroke, and 52% less likely to have experienced a stroke. And my guess is because of the study that was being done, they were looking at people with memory and aging, and a lot of that is impacted by strokes. And so that might have some impact on the actual looking at stroke specifically. But if there's anything I can do to be healthier, I think, this would be an easy way for me to figure out how to increase my wellness by trying to fulfill my individual purpose. But let's get back to, so, what are we really talking about with individual purpose? And so McKinsey has put together 9 types of individual purpose. And what they do is they have you kind of score, there's the 9 of them, and put the most important, you score the most important one first, and then you go down the line. So they have when they do this, they have a way that you can put a certain number of, this is very, very important to me, this is less important to me, but still important. And so you'll see in some of the results how it results in data that you can use to learn about yourself as well as to learn about the people that work for you. So the first type of individual purpose is one that's an achiever or a sense of achievement. And they like the sense of authority, being the most influential person in the group, and having status and high income. So as we're going through these, kind of think about which one of these are the most important to you, and maybe write them down and put a check mark against the ones that are really important to you, or several check marks, and just get an idea of what you think on this. Somebody who believes in conservation, you have support for and caring for the environment, that you're a caring person, you like to help those closest to you. And remember, you're probably all of these things, but what you're trying to do is to look at which ones are the most important to you. We're looking at freedom, forming your own opinions, choosing your own personal goals, and being able to learn on your own. So just being able to set your own direction and how you're going to get there. Having respect, and having people respect you. So you don't want to be shamed in front of others. I don't think anybody does, and you don't, and you might do a lot to avoid humiliation. So how important it is. How important is it to you to be respected? And then how important is it to you to follow tradition, to preserve and practice the values and rituals associated with culture or religion? What about enjoyment? Do you crave excitement in your life? Do you crave adventures? Do you really crave new and different experiences? How much of your time is spent figuring out how you can have fun? And then versus being more stable, having order or structure or process clarity and rules and standards. Does this make you feel better than maybe um, jumping out and trying to do things that are wildly exciting? And then the final one talks about equality and justice, where you want to ensure fairness and understanding and listening to others. So we know that this isn't fixed or static. While you might find that one of these is more strongly describes you than the others, for the most part, what you're going to see is that you have combinations of them, and you're going to have an emphasis or priority of certain ones of those. And you might find that different people in your family or your friends might have those in different orders, and that either makes you get along really well or maybe doesn't. Maybe help, maybe become somewhat of a blockage for that. But also remember that your individual purpose isn't static, and it may change or evolve over time as you get older, because we can't get younger. So I've seen that when I was looking at this, my individual purpose has actually changed as I went from being a full-time educator, from being a full-time mom, to being back to being a mom and businesswoman, And now, my children are grown, and so I'm more focused on work than I am on caring and nurturing my family. Not that I don't still love my family, but I'm not doing it day to day like, like we did when they were living at home. But the other thing is that we also change in response to a life-changing event. And it might be something that a personal tragedy or something personal exciting that happens to you, or it could be as a result of the pandemic. And we're seeing more and more people say that changing jobs, reevaluating who they are and what they want to do. And part of this change is creating, in the United States at least right now, job openings where they can't fill them because people are really strongly considering, do I want to go back to what I was doing? Do I want to change? And we're seeing, obviously, during the 2020, people didn't change jobs at all. They lost their jobs, if anything. So this wasn't a good time to just change jobs. But so a lot of that is happening naturally. But we also have people really looking at what it is that they want to do. So let's look at just a couple of examples so you can see how this works. This is a person whose primary type of purpose is to have freedom, and the secondary two are respect and tradition. So for a person like this, they like working independently while having opportunities to stress test ideas with others, and they like to choose how to accomplish their goals while still observing the traditions of family and culture. Things that block you, that make you unhappy, would be being micromanaged or stuck with inflexible processes, to being censored in public and being pressured to take a direction that goes against established practices. So this is an example of one of the outcomes to doing this study and participating in this survey. On the achiever, the other hand, is looking at achievement and tradition as their primary types, and secondary types being both enjoyment and respect. So the purpose activators are opportunities to increase earnings and gain stature in the eyes of others, being the authority on a subject and impressing others, and having the opportunity for fun and excitement. Things that block you would be feeling invisible or lacking influence in a group, or fearing that failure is going to lead to humiliation, or having to act out of sync with your own culture or religion. And finally, the third one that they shared is the caregiver. So your primary type is caring, and your secondary type is stability. So you want to be able to help others or mentor colleagues. You want that work-life balance that provides opportunities to respond to the needs of family and friends. And you like that sense of security and order. You're blocked when you feel pulled away from family and friends or isolated from colleagues, and where there's an uncertainty or lack of an orderly path. So this just gives you some ideas, and I found that these were really helpful. And so there, we have provided the link here where you should be able to get to McKinsey and be able to learn more about each of these types and be able to see if you can. I did not actually look to see if the survey is available for free to take or not, so I apologize for that. But I found it was an interesting way to start thinking about yourself. And as leaders in your organization, start thinking about what kinds of people you need to align to your organizational purpose, which really becomes our next topic. So the purpose of this webinar was to help you understand how organizational purpose and individual purpose need to be aligned. And so let's look next at how might that work. So organizational purpose is really the core reason for your being and the positive impact you have on the world as an organization. Similar thoughts, but using a little bit different terminology. It's going to shape your business strategy. It's going to inspire the people who work for you. It's going to engage your customers and community, to try to help you steer choices at moments of truth. And is really going to be fully embedded in your culture. And this is why we a lot of times see that purpose and culture are aligned. And then the purpose of the organization is going to lead to strategic choices and build on those cultural strengths and drive your impact. And this is going to then drive, what are your operation strategies? What are your marketing and sales strategies? How do you engage your people? And how do you measure how well you're doing? So one of the things that's really becoming much more clear in the last few years is, if you're not already leading a purpose-driven brand or what it is that your company stands for, if you're not, you really should be. And the purpose is set to becoming that dominating force in business management. They're seeing this not just as a trend, but this is happening, and you need to be ready for it. So a lot of organizations are orienting themselves around the benefits they can bring to the world, not just the value that they can create for their shareholders. And so this idea of purpose is a concept that's necessarily based on ethics, values, and principles, really that fundamental view of what's right and wrong. And this may contrast or conflict with any given individual. So this is why, 76% of you felt you had clarity in your organization's purpose, but 24% of you didn't. And so understanding that you probably don't want to work for a company that isn't aligned to your own purpose. So this is why you're looking at culture, and culture is important. It's a huge driver. We talk about that all the time. And purpose helps inform that culture. So we really do need to drive down further into the culture and understand what that individual purpose is, what the organizational purpose is, and what that shared purpose looks like. And this issue is challenging and it's also sensitive. And so what they have found is that the organizations that manage to straddle that approach that aligns purpose focused leaders with an engaged workforce are going to have the most success. We have talked a lot in the webinars this year about having an engaged workforce and how to keep them engaged during challenging times and during periods of change. And so now we're looking at the fact that you need to that having purpose focused leaders and a purpose focused organization will help engage your workforce as well. And so one of the things you need to understand as an organization is that individual purpose benefits organizations. So your employees, the people that you work with, when that's in alignment, it helps the organization. And so purpose can be a really important contributor to that employee experience. And so they're seeing that this is in turn linked to higher levels, again, of employee engagement, to stronger organizational commitment, and to those increased feelings of well-being. And people who find that individual purpose congruent with their jobs tend to get more meaning from their roles. This is pretty much what I've been saying the whole time, is that you want to be happy in your work. You're spending a lot of time at work. So how do you find meaning in your work? And when you're able to do that, you're finding that the people who are aligned are more productive and more likely to outperform their peers. And so this is where that organizational value comes in. And why should you care about your employees' individual purpose? Just get the job done. Well, the fact is that they're going to do a better job at their job when there is alignment between individual and organizational purpose. And so this is really the baseline for the reason for why people on your leadership team should pay more attention to individual purpose. As companies again start returning to operations, depending on where you are and what you may have already returned to normal operations, but others are not on that path yet, and people have changed since they've been gone, even though they've been working remotely or working differently. There has been change, and so we need to start considering this as you get back to your new next normal. And I would say that anybody you work with, if you're on any sort of team, this is a conversation that you may want to be having about, what's changed, how are things different. Just start having those conversations, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So again, kind of another little picture of how you can connect individual and organizational resilience, where you have that individual impact, you have your organizational impact, and you want to have some sort of societal impact. And so you really want to figure out how you can tie the individual purpose to your organizational purpose. And so as an organization, you really need to decide, who are you inspired to impact? How are you trying to impact society itself? So there was a study done last fall, I think it was December of 2020, where McKinsey looked at connecting how you might connect individual and organizational purpose, and looking at kind of shifting at why you want to do it, because we've kind of given you the argument as to why you want to do it, but how you go about doing that. And so when they did this survey of employees, they found that many companies don't have a purpose that they can identify, let alone one they feel that makes a difference. So 82% of the employees felt that it was important for their company to have a purpose. And 72% felt that their organizational purpose should actually receive more weight than profit, which was interesting. 62% felt that their organizations have a purpose statement. So 76% of you said that you understood your organization's purpose. What I didn't ask you was, does your organization actually have a purpose statement? Excuse me. And then 42% believed that if they had a purpose statement, that it actually drove impact. So here you're down to 62% of the companies have one, and of the ones that have one, only 42% of them actually feel that their statements have value or have an impact. PwC did a study quite a few years ago. I think it was 2017 maybe, that was again looking at how to connect individual and organizational purpose. And they drove this from a Gallup poll as well. And what they found is, and this was done in the United States itself. So they surveyed 1,500 full and part-time employees and 500, just over 500 business leaders in 39 different industries. And they found a big disconnect between what business leaders think the purpose, who actually think that purpose is central to the business, which is a nice number, 79%, where actually 34% of them are actually using purpose as a guidepost for their decision making. So here you go, 79% think it's important, 34% are actually doing anything about it. So purpose is increasingly being touted as that key to navigating not just regular times, but a really big key to navigating when you have a complex, volatile, and ambiguous world. And that has certainly even gotten more so since 2017. And we see strategy is ever changing, and few decisions are obviously right or wrong. That whole black and white thing about this is the direct way forward is not as clear. And really what they're finding is that fewer than 20% of leaders have a strong sense of their own individual purpose, which makes it hard for them to lead an organization's purpose and being able to drive and understand what it means for their employees. And so being able to actually make a statement for that is also challenging. So one of the things, McKinsey's study was done in December of 2020, and this study by PwC was leveraging work also done by the Gallup polls back in 2017. So it looks like there's actually work that has been done during that time, but it's not easy work. One of the things that they found was that when they compared what the employees thought of the value of purpose in workplace and what the business leaders thought, there was a huge disconnect. So you can see in the brighter red here are the scores that employees gave. So meaning in day-to-day work was the strongest thing for employees, where the business leaders had reputation for growth and innovation as their strongest. The second one for employees was having a strong sense of community, or the second one for business leaders was to have their company have distinction and differentiation from others. So there's a huge disconnect there between those two, which in some ways makes sense because you're dealing with leaders versus employees. But when you look at the top 3 priorities for employees, it was having meaning in their day-to-day work, having a sense of community, and having their company make an impact. So they were energized by knowing that they were helping their company to have an impact. The leaders' top 3 priorities was a reputation for growth, having that distinction and differentiation, and then, like I said, having that meaning for work came in third. So at least they both made the top 3, which was important. But when you look at what was the most important for each one, there's quite a difference between those. So one of the things that's going to be important, if it's not already happening at your organization, is to connect individual and organizational purpose. And we're seeing that with the younger people, is that they want to understand and learn about the value of their daily duties through their team leaders. Those are the people that they work with the most closely. And so if you're a team leader or you're part of a team, really you want to work with those people that are within your team. And since managers interact with their employees regularly, they're really going to have the greatest visibility into how their employees work, contributes to the broader impact of the organization. So it's really important for team leaders and managers to be that voice for the organization to the people that they work with. And so this insight, combined with their position as team leaders, really provides an immense opportunity to be a translator or connect the organization purpose to the roles and responsibilities of the individual team members. So one of the questions become, how do you then communicate your purpose messages? What things are you doing to do that? And so here you see 3 channels that you could do that with. So you have client and customer stories, you have employee stories, and you have leadership messages. So your client and customer stories are most often communicated through social media, secondly, through your company website, and thirdly, through leadership messages. Your employee stories generally come through your team leaders, secondly, through maybe company-sponsored events where you have an opportunity to get together with people, And thirdly, through that leadership message again. And then your leadership messages obviously need to come from your leaders. Secondly, are most often coming from the team leaders. And thirdly, coming from your company sponsored events. And what they found is that employees most favor hearing about the impact of their company's products and services through client and customer stories, employee stories, and leadership messages. And so, these three venues or avenues themselves become ways for you to share that information. And so, really, when you look at what we might call human interest stories, how those are illuminated, and employees can personally identify with the impact of their company's products and services through those human interest stories, and they can see the difference their own work makes in people's lives. And this helps them to be more inspired at work. So, the good news is that these stories already exist, they just need to be told. So, the question I ask to you is, how are you communicating your human element of your work? So this is a challenge, and I want you to be thinking about, no matter where you are in your organization, is how can you better communicate the human element of your work? And then secondly, what opportunities are you giving employees to connect with colleagues and customers on purpose? Because the bottom line is that employees want the opportunity to personally engage with purpose and not just be fed anonymous, passive messages that provide no chance to connect. So personal delivery and the opportunity to dialogue becomes very, very important. You also need to include purpose to the center of your talent strategy. So 79% people of leaders believe that, or all business leaders say that purpose is central to an organization's existence, but only 75% say that they actually think that they're doing it. But then they tie down to the question is, have you changed or are about to change your recruitment strategy to align with purpose? Only 29% saying they're actually doing that. So they believe it's important, but they're not doing it much. 32% have changed or about to change how they evaluate employees to align with their purpose. And then 35% reward employees who demonstrate values or behaviors that are aligned to purpose. So again, we talk about getting employees to personally connect with your purpose, engage in discussions around it. These are necessary ingredients to activating your purpose, but they're not sufficient. Ultimately, purpose needs to direct much of how people are managed and how they're recruited, developed, and rewarded. So how is purpose incorporated in your recruitment strategy? Because a company that touts commitment to and passion for its purpose must also recruit to those same values. So if you're going to attract the top and the right talent for your company, employers need to involve candidates in discussions on purpose before they hand over that job opportunity. So placing purpose at the heart of your talent strategies, means you need to also cultivate values that underpin your purpose. So first off, you need to know what your purpose is, and then look at what are those critical behaviors that embody them. So in other words, what values are needed for your company to live out its purpose, and what behaviors collectively help to characterize those. But we know that there's really little point in developing these behaviors if you're not evaluating them. So how are you developing and rewarding the behaviors and values that align to your company's purpose? You can't reward people and you can't develop them if you're not measuring them. And so this really means calling out those behaviors that do not align with your company's purpose as well as identifying the ones that do. So when you're developing and evaluating employees against those critical purpose-driven behaviors, company really demonstrates its utmost commitment to that. But again, we kind of tie back to how important it is as your employee base changes by age as well. So non-millennials are only two times more likely to stay when they have a strong time connection. Two times isn't bad, but it's still a pretty strong measure of having a strong connection to your purpose. Where over 5 times but the millennials are more likely to stay when they have a strong connection to their employer's purpose. And having younger people in jobs, my kids being younger in the workplace, it really fascinates me to hear them talk about, oh, I'm not going to work there because I'm not interested in what they do. Even though they're very well matched to the actual job, they're not interested in what the company does. And I think that's a message that companies need to hear clear. Um, because we see that as of the 2017 study by Gallup and PwC, that only 27% of business leaders are helping employees connect to their own purpose and to the work of the company. And I want to share another quick story here. I was having a conversation about this with a friend yesterday, and she shared that she just got a big 15% increase in her salary. This is the second year in a row that she got over 10% increase in her salary, and versus the normal one at the company was, your 3 to 4%. And I said, wow, they must really want you to stay there, and they must really like you. And she said, yeah, they do, but I'm not staying. And I said, well, why aren't you staying? You really like the people you work with. I mean, you golf with them, you hang out with them, you spend social time together with people, on your team and the people that you work with. Why wouldn't you stay there? And the example, she gave two examples. She said, I was working on this special project last year in 2020 for 6 months. So I put aside all my regular work and worked on this special project. It was very successful. It accomplished all its objectives, and it was part of the reason why I got the big pay increase last year. But she said, in those 6 months, um, I nobody did the job that I was supposed to be doing. And therefore I had to look at, well, what's the value of the work that I'm doing for the company if I didn't do it for 6 months and nobody else did it and nobody noticed? And then they had another huge crisis at the beginning of 2021. It really lasted through May. So about 5 or 6 months where she was pulled away from her regular work. It was non-pandemic related. We still have other crises, that are not related to the pandemic. And what she shared was that, again, she did a great job. She was rewarded for the work that she did, but her job, nothing happened in her job. It was just left to the side. And so, she said, I have these personal goals that I'm supposed to meet. And for the past 2 years, I've not met any of those personal goals that I've been asked to make in my job. And out of the past 24 months, I've only actually focused on my job less than 12 months of that. And so I've not felt that I've been able to reach my goals. And the company hasn't noticed that I haven't reached those. And the company hasn't noticed that the work that I'm supposed to be doing to contribute hasn't been done. And so she goes, I see no reason for me to continue working there. So here is where she's making really good money. She's very happy, but she's not feeling that her individual purpose is being met because the company isn't valuing what she's doing. And my guess is that they're completely oblivious to how she feels and no one's asked. So thinking about that, I think those are really eye openers. I never had considered that, and obviously she said that, and it was in the context of what I was talking about here today, gave me a better sense for that. I'm only briefly going to talk about purpose-driven leadership. We're talking about being a purpose-driven organization. That means you have to have purpose-driven leaders, and so, um, you know, I think what I was hearing from my friend was that most of us go to our graves with our music still inside of us unplayed, what it is that we want to accomplish. And we need to have that fulfillment. We don't just want to go to work every day. We want to feel fulfilled with what we're doing, that we're actually accomplishing something. And so this is a topic all in itself. It's one that's been around for probably the last 15 or 20 years. And it really is totally tied to how you can pull all of this together. So part of your job as a leader is to ensure that organizational and individual purpose are connected and mutual enforcing. Anywhere from hiring to your feedback and incentives to your learning to match individuals to jobs they're going to find most fulfilling. But before you do that, you need to help your employees better understand their own purpose and how they can characterize it and how they can align to it. So you need to have a way to do that. And so you need to be an open and empathetic leader in order to do that, in order to help people leave their comfort zones and explore how their purpose might be better met at work. And I am looking at the clock and going, I am not going to get as much time for questions as I wanted, so I apologize. Um, so how do you place purpose at the core of what you're doing? Your company's core reason for being, and where can you have a unique and positive impact on society? So now more than ever, you need to have good answers to these questions. The majority of employees in the corporate world continue to feel disengaged. They're agitating for decisions and behaviors that they can be proud of to stand behind and gravitating towards companies that have that clear, unequivocal, and positive impact on the world. And there's a disconnect between public perceptions of businesses and the potential for good and the employee's desire for meaning at work versus what they experience, which is actually part of what they're calling a purpose gap. So the only way to bridge that gap is to embed your reflection and exploration and discussion and action into the heart of your business and organization. So how do you do that? First, you need to understand that purpose is personal and emotional. And I've given you some personal and emotional examples today. I don't usually talk about emotional things in a business webinar, but I think companies need to understand that purpose is personal and emotional. So you need to get real. You need to get a baseline of your stakeholders and your employees' perspectives. Which pillars of your strategy are the most and least congruent with your own purpose? So what are, you say what your purpose is. What is what you're doing? How is that aligned with your strategy? And how would a ranking of your products and service according to purpose compare with one based on profitability? I think that's a really important question. And you need to connect your purpose to your employees' superpower. You need to set bold aspirations and push for specific, I can never say this word, being very specific, excuse me, on the alignment between your organization's purpose and value. And then thirdly, you need to organize to keep purpose really at the top of everyone's mind. Do your people routinely reflect on purpose? These are questions you should ask. Do your critical organization building blocks, whether they are business units, your agile squads, or pockets of functional expertise, do they have the autonomy and incentives to do their work with purpose? And are your purpose-driven functions, such as philanthropy, self-contained silos, or are they connected with the core purpose of your business? These are big questions to ask. And then finally, you need to measure what you can. Every time we talk about anything at iCore, we talk about how are you going to measure it? How are you going to provide data? Because we need to be driven by data. So what data and evidence are critical to understanding your organization's total social, environmental, and financial impact? And how much insight are your current reporting outputs generating about your efforts to deliver on purpose? When was the last time you took action in response to a metric about your purpose? And perhaps even more important, what is not currently being measured or reported that society could hold you accountable for in the future? So depending on what it is, could be greenhouse gas emissions or something associated with your industry. And then looking again at your performance management systems, what are they taking into account? And so this article here on purpose shifting from why to how includes some really nice case studies. I don't have time to share them today, but one has to do with a bank in Scandinavia, and they wanted. Let me just briefly share that they wanted to learn more about their individual purpose of their people, and so they spent 6 months listening. They had workshops, they had online surveys, they had more than 1,500, and if you're a Scandinavian, they had coffee corner discussions because coffee is very important. And they asked questions about why did you join our company? Why are you staying? And what do you see as impact for, and this is a bank, so a financial institution. And what they really wanted to do was move past slogans and buzzwords. PayPal did something similarly, and they looked at their 25,000 employees. And what they found was that their purpose of their company was on improving the financial health of its customers. And they realized they aligned with the individual purpose. Their employees themselves, they found a lot of them, even though they thought they were giving them a decent wage, they were not financially well. And so they felt that if they were going to be doing that as a company, they needed to also focus on that as for their employees themselves. And so what they did is they did financial wellness training. They tried to help employees have a higher net disposable income at the end of the day. And so they were really putting to reality for their employees the purpose of the organization itself. So this is part of how you create value in your purpose. So you need to identify and build around your unique assets, capabilities, and you need to leverage this potential. And so, purpose can generate top line growth. There's a lot of work that's been done to show that this can be leveraged. Like we said, this was the why part of it. You can have more loyal customers, you foster trust, you preserve your customer base. It should help you to reduce costs if you're looking at improving energy or water efficiency. You can also help to unleash your employee potential. We talked about how you can win that war for talent, helps you retain your best people, and boosts employee motivation and again, retention. And then you can also make you more aware of shifting external expectations. And so where you might need to shift in your policy direction and therefore helping you identify risks that you might otherwise risk. So this helps you to do some of that forecasting. And of course, they're saying this can improve your balance sheet as well. We've talked a little bit about recruiting. This needs to be specific. You need to recruit the right people for your company. And maybe that's part of why there's some job openings today, is that companies are looking more at the right person, not just the right skill sets. When you're doing your onboarding, making purpose part of that first discussion for both the manager and the team to build that shared vocabulary. by starting people off right by helping them reflect on how the work in the organization help connect with their own purpose. And we know that there's been tons of research on there that even by just talking about personal values at work, help them to significantly outperform their peers. And so they're looking at retention rate of more than 30% increase. And as you know, when people leave, it costs your company money. So retention rate is a huge way to increase the revenue at your company as well. And then looking at feedback and performance management. So the value of strengths-based feedback is well known. So if you're adding purpose to that feedback, it can only help them at work. So going back to leveraging individual purpose during times of uncertainty, we know that the pandemic has been cruel. It's been a really cruel reminder for companies everywhere on how important it is to never take healthy or motivated employees for granted. And so we know that individual purpose directly affects both health and motivation. Forward-looking companies are going to take this time to focus on purpose as part of a broader effort to ensure that talent is given the primary care it really deserves. And at companies where employees have actually excelled during a crisis, they've been able to do that extra. Business leaders are going to want to find ways to recapture and sustain that sense of organizational energy and urgency and speed without the accompanying fear and stress. You can't just keep pushing people. They only have so much. And so how can you keep up that same engagement without having that same fear and stress? And so here we talked early on about the organization leadership having, using purpose as their guideposts. We need to leverage individuals' purpose as a guidepost as well, especially during times of crisis to help, because this will help people face up to uncertainties and help them navigate better and help them mitigate the damaging effects of long-term stress. Because we know that people that have a strong sense of purpose tend to be more resilient and exhibit better recovery from negative events. This is what we saw with the why at the front end. They also found from some research that was done last fall that people who feel that they're living their lives with purpose and that they're living their lives with purpose at work are 5 times report levels of well-being that are 5 times higher than those that don't, and are 4 times more likely to, again, report those higher engagement levels, and those are the people that stay. So just to kind of summarize at the end here, the Finance Innovation Lab talked about the dangers of misalignment of purpose. And so here we always talk about, we've been giving you positive reasons for why you should do this, but your organization is at risk if there's a misalignment of purpose. And so if you're, for individual purpose, is your intended is to build strong relationships of trust to help improve people's lives. That's your individual purpose, and that's what you want to do at your job. But at work, you're working in a relational role, but you're incentivized to maximize revenue even when it's not in the best interest of your customers. That's got to make you feel uncomfortable at work. If your organization's purpose is to enable inclusive and fair access to retail banking for everyone in the UK, but then your bank has fee-free bank accounts with overdraft reliant business model that disproportionately charges the financially vulnerable. And so, they're making their money off of the overdrafts to the people who are having trouble, keeping money in the bank. And then your industry purpose is to safeguard assets and facilitate transactions for people to go about their daily lives. But the UK financial system itself excludes 1.5 million unbanked people. 1.5% of customers pay 50% of the unarranged overdraft fees. So again, you're seeing that misalignment of purpose. And so understanding, going back to that tree model, you've got your industry purpose, your organizational purpose, your team purpose, and your individual purpose. And all of those things need to be in alignment. And when they're not, you've actually put yourself at risk. So to summarize, purpose is not an initiative, it's a way of business. It must be core to all of your decisions, your conversations, and behaviors across all levels to be authentic and deliver on the wealth of advantages it promises. And really now more than ever, companies must cultivate the power of purpose if they are to succeed in a world where the opportunities and responsibilities of business have never been greater. We, as usual, give you our references here. So we have Forbes, McKinsey, Finance Innovation Lab, and Sustainable Brands. We also had an older article from Harvard Business Review. We have two actually, I forgot the October webinar. We have an October webinar coming up too. Sorry, I was already thinking I was in October. So we have our October webinar on October 22nd, I believe. And then the November is talking about your global value change, and December we'll kind of finish up with culture. And we should have our 2022 schedule coming out in November. Just as a reminder, we have recently launched our new online assessment tool on how you can measure your organizational resilience and a recognition system. And of course, follow us as much any way that you would like. So I'd like to just take a quick look and see if there's questions. The first question is, this is fascinating. How do you think this is impacting business continuity programs, or is this more about change to organizational culture? Well, obviously, as business continuity was a part of the job that I did at one time, and I'm fully engaged in business continuity and ISO 22301 from a educational point of view, as well as the reality of how that works. I think this is very relevant, and I think one of the things that's changed. And I might not be saying this the right way. I'm not trying to negatively impact anyone, but I think that COVID, depending on how it was handled at your company, whether it was a crisis managed responsibility that include business continuity in it or excluded it, is going to be um, a driver long term in this. And so I don't think it's just about culture, but I think it's a driver for culture, as we saw at the beginning. But I think that we companies need to see how the role of business continuity supports its organizational purpose and what value it brings, and therefore you can leverage that as individuals that lead in business continuity to say, I really feel important to my company because I'm helping them um, get through this crisis. And so again, it depends on where business continuity is in your organization. One of the next question is, I agree so many are moving towards purpose-driven, also impact-driven, especially for social enterprises. Do you see purpose-driven as different than impact-driven? I don't necessarily. I haven't studied as much on specifically impact driven, but I think it's maybe just like a lot of us, we're seeing the word resilience being used to replace other terms, business continuity or technology recovery, or just being better at what your organization does. That maybe purpose driven has been around for a while, and maybe it's just a new terminology, and I could totally be told that I'm wrong in my understanding of that, but we want to make an impact in the world. And so I know, as the president of ICOR, I am totally engaged in making sure that ICOR has an impact in education and credentialing of people who can help to lead that change. And that's really our core business, and helping organizations to build themselves as being more resilient. And what I have realized is that when we're doing our hiring, I've expressed my passion for that, but I haven't really asked people how they contribute to that. And so I'm also being challenged as a leader at my organization to make sure that I'm doing that. But I think no matter what word you use, we all want to have an impact. We want to, when we kind of go back to that quote about, why are we here? And we want to find fulfillment at work. And that word fulfillment at work is about how does working for a company that has a positive impact in the world and that you're contributing to that impact. So somebody is having trouble with the audio going in and out. So this is recorded. So we will send you the link to the recording after the webinar. So again, feel free to contact me directly too if you didn't get some of the responses to the questions. It is the top of the hour. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope you see you back on October 22nd when I forgot to leave that on there. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your week.